expats Googling something or attending conferences, writing reports, sending to Japan, and getting thank you email, that's it, right? If that's the case, probably that's not really the right contact.
Well, I don't think you can prevent this, first of all. I do think that there are ways to actually minimize that. And I think that there are really, to me, two things. One is actually spending time up front as you set up the organization here and actually figuring out the aversion level, right? What is the level of autonomy? What level of decision authority exists here? What approvals are typically needed? Actually getting to the level of specificity where when people agree, they agree on something specific. On the back end of it, I think this is a step to help. It's not going to solve it. I think the other step to help is to actually over-communicate, right? Fundamentally, not assume that if you agreed on something up front, that you can actually go and execute, right? Fundamentally, kind of do more communication and do more interactions that you normally would feel necessary. Again, won't prevent what happened in this particular case, obviously, but kind of doing up front and along the way you described, I think usually helps.
And I think also it's related, so Uber cases, it may be better to bring the executives or the decision maker very early timing to coming to the US and see and try what's going on. So in Greek case also, so actually 5 or 6 board members, but they are basically at least coming to the US one time, at least one time. Hopefully 2 or 3 times coming to the US and see what happens, see what's going on. It's probably super important for the decision making. So like.
I don't think it's limited to Japanese companies and headquarters. I've seen the same problem from HP Labs to HP Division across the street. A 5-minute walk. I've seen a problem from NASA Ames, wants to do technology transfer. And I think what's lacking, as you mentioned, is some kind of structure that makes this, incorporates this into the design of the organization. So for example, you have customer relations department. You have investor relations department. Can you imagine how you might have a startup or entrepreneurial or innovation relations department that would make it part of the design of the organization to impedance match this different culture?
Questions? I have a question for our moderator. I mean, we haven't really talked about the life sciences at all, and I'd like your view of what your work with Japan has been and how the life sciences has gone with those kind of interactions.
I think to some extent, so I see a lot of, so right now actually I advise a venture capital, like a life sciences venture capital firm in Japan, but they are largely looking to invest in Japanese companies that are then maybe interested in expanding, because I think one kind of unique thing about life sciences and pharmaceuticals is that the U.S. market is really critical because there's not, so one thing is addressing how to get there. I mean, another unique issue is insurance reimbursement and then dealing with insurers. Actually, I'm kind of embroiled in that right now. But so I think there's some unique issues, and then I think that there's some issues that are probably common to the to all of these industries. I know that there are some Japanese pharmaceutical companies who have a variety of different operations in Silicon Valley, whether it's the kind of sort of not really research, but kind of scouting, and then of course corporate venture capital. But I think a lot of the same issues, kind of the disconnect between what's going on here and then what's going on there. I see, so people who coming from there want to use strategies that seem to work in Japan, but are maybe particularly unique to Japan. Again, I'm thinking of insurance reimbursement and like single payer healthcare, and then they want to kind of post that onto what's going on here, and then it doesn't seem to work as well, and then trying to explain how that that model might not work here. But I think, those kind of issues is what I see. I think, in terms of automotive technology or IT related stuff or computers, I think it's not kind of biomedical innovation you can do almost anywhere, and then I think it's the commercialization aspect that's kind of different. Whereas I think here we're talking about innovation, like fundamental innovation for technology. Maybe that's a difference between the areas, but I don't know if that helps.
Oh, it was information about that, yeah, it's fine.
I'd like to maybe hear some views from the panel about how you interact with the ecosystem and how you interact within your company to deal with the reality of being successful here. I mean, given the fact that your national culture cannot be changed and your company has a strong internal culture, but yet it takes a certain way of doing things, a certain mindset, speed, risk-taking to be successful outside of Japan, in particular Silicon Valley. And we know that over the last 2-3 decades, many waves of Japanese companies have come to set up CBC, to set up R&D labs, and some of them have created kind of a sour feeling with many of the partners that you have dealt with, either VCs or big corporation, because of this mismatch. So what are some of the things that you guys have found to be successful dealing with the ecosystem, the VCs, the university, the partners, the startups, the entrepreneurs, as well as what you do inside the company to make sure that there's good alignment? Because without that end-to-end, you're not going to satisfy some of the constituent and you'll kind of miss your opportunities.
I think I would take that question because we changed our model from corporate VC to product lab. When we were doing venture capital, all decisions were made in Tokyo. And that's very typical for Japanese newcomers here. So we didn't have the authority to make an investment decision. Because the ultimate purpose of Honda doing corporate VC was to reach out to technology innovators and work with them and innovate our products somehow by incorporating that innovators' ideas or technologies. So it was R&D purpose. So financial return was really secondary objective. So so that's why we were structured that way. Every time we make first investment was relatively easy, but whenever follow-on comes in, they start questioning, okay, why do we invest more than one time? Second, the follow-ons. They never understand venture finance because they have been living in a corporate finance structure. So so it was so much hassle for my team to explain over and over, and every 3 years new big guy comes in, so he has no idea what singularity was doing. And particularly we were R&D, and the Honda's organizational structure is Honda Motor Corporation as a parent company, and Honda R&D Corporation as a wholly owned subsidiary. And we work basically on the contract from the parent company to deliver R&D outcomes like new products or new technologies. So they give money for research purpose to R&D. Then R&D started venture investment. So every time they see some startup's name on the balance sheet, they kind of scratch head and why is R&D really using money for equity investment? So all of those came into play, and that was so much hassle. But we coordinated a number of interesting collaborations, which was actually our primary purpose. So that's why we changed our model from equity participation to more strategic partnership and strategic collaboration. So right now we are not really investing in equity anymore. but we are doing way more collaborations than when we were corporate venture investor. So yeah, it really depends what your ultimate goal is and what you want to accomplish in Silicon Valley. So for Honda's example, that's how we kind of transform from corporate VC to Open Innovation Lab.
Maybe I can explain about our experience. So we do notice that the most effective way is to have some kind of a VIP or any of the members' company come here and actually feel it. But that's not always easy to do. As MLab, I think MLab is also a platform to have bridged the culture here and the headquarters in Tokyo, or wherever it is. And it's still Mitsubishi Corporation's case at this moment, not all the members right now. But what we're trying to do is to have more boost of information flowing into our headquarters. So, for example, once in 6 months, so we've done it twice now. We go back to Japan and do a seminar for collecting like 500 people per. Each time I think 100 people times 5 or something like that, or 5, and have the air of this atmosphere flow into our headquarters. It doesn't mean that the headquarters is not interested in Silicon Valley. They have a lot of information, a lot of knowledge from newspapers and magazines now. But the lack would be the liveliness of what we are experiencing here. So we actually go there and talk about what Silicon Valley is. The other part we started as MLab is a second webinar, distributing the latest technology from sometimes external, most of the time, but down the road probably internal people doing their own kind of expertise, explaining in front of you, maybe 15, 20 minutes, and put it on the web. Culture-wise, I don't think at least our company has the kind of culture to watch webinars when they like lunchtime or something. But actually, it's gaining good results. So to have more understanding about this culture, then eventually, if we can kind of pick up the traction interest on the Tokyo side, and they come up with some kind of idea, then we can be ready about that. So we do have a structure of information dissemination for that, and both ways. Having them come here, but for not, if it's not realistic for many of the people, do the dissemination now.
Yeah, Michael here. I had a question for the panel. And this is about, there's so many complex issues that you're talking about today, which are very helpful. Underlying it, I wonder your opinion on something, which is the risk aversion or the appetite for risk in the Japan culture. And have you seen that change, let's say on a fair basis, let's say the last 10 years? Reason for the question is context. When I look at Germany or Switzerland or Nordics, they were also risk averse. They're getting a little more appetite for that. I wonder from your perspectives, for all 5 of you or whoever wants to comment, have you seen a change, from 2007 to 2017? And this R word, the risk, I would argue it's actually not risk. It's, is there an appetite for failure? And that's the F word, right, failure, which I want to know, will it or is it happening in Japan the same way as it is here on University Avenue, where somebody's bragging at Starbucks that I've been in 4 startups, I failed in the first one, I made money on the second one, I had a good exit on the third one, and I failed the fourth one, and you're a hero. And the question is, in Japan, is there that appetite, or is that shifting, or do you think that's one of the pushes that you just can't see change based on cultural norms? That's the question.
From the incumbent, then? So I would say it's starting to change, especially in the past 1 or 2 years, for our company, I guess. Before about a year ago, failure was not an option for our company. But as we started this information dissemination and having people, especially VIPs, coming here and learn about failure tolerance, I think the culture is starting to change. Is it steady enough? We don't know. But at least some of our so-called group CEOs, so we do have 7 business groups in Mitsubishi Corporation, and they have the responsibility to lead the business. Some of the, or at least some of the GCEO, group CEO is starting to say that, oh, in Silicon Valley, the culture is fail fast, fail often. And he repeated to all his men, like 200, 300 people. That never happened like a year ago. So, starting from the top, I think some change are being seen at this moment. We have to continue this, I guess. So that's where we are. Often the time, if you look back like 10, 15 years, if something fails, actually most of the corporates pull back, but we need to continue that. So this time, even if something happens, if the bubble crash or so-called, we need to continue that, continue.
I guess I'd say with the larger companies that I've dealt with over the last 5 years, I still don't see that much of a difference. You know, when I talk to my friends in Japan from when I worked there, most of them are still Toshiba employees, right? So that kind of implies the downside of failure is pretty high, right? With lifetime employment, and I think that system is softening, but at least for the small sample that I deal with, they're still there, right? The other thing I've seen in working with Japanese companies is they tend to still move really, really slow. And this, I think, maybe smaller companies like Cree, that may be different, but, the larger traditional companies, it's hard to do business with them because our cycles are much shorter than they were 25 years ago. And the cycles in Japan, at least for the companies that I've dealt with, don't seem to have changed much. And so we still have kind of that impedance mismatch between what we need as a business and what these more traditional companies are supplying. So I think that still has a long way to go.
I mean, I would add to it that I don't think it's a culture change. I think it's a change in the calibration point that is slowly happening. And what I mean by that is that the cost of failure is lower because the cost of actually experimenting and improvising is actually lower than it's ever been. And I think that the drumbeat of fast fail and all that has been going on for a number of years. So I think there's enough indoctrination happening in this globally that I think there is a perception of risk that is changing. But I don't think that necessarily the underlying cultural preferences and biases are changing. I think it's a more, you can see it operationally, but it's not because it's a cultural change in my view.
I think we have time for maybe 2 more.
I'm Jack Borman, Chairman of U.S.-Japan MedTech Frontiers. I've been working in Japan, with Japan, since 1985. So I have a question that maybe you can help me with. Let's say that Japanese companies fall into 4 categories. One are those who act like Silicon Valley companies. Maybe we can find 1 or 2 of those. Maybe there's some that have what we would call in the U.S. a champion. So that might be more likely to be an SME, where there's a founder or president or a family where they actually decide things. Another might be one where there's local control here, so control of funding, people, decisions is here. And the others are none of the above, or there's one we describe here. I have difficulty still telling which kind of Japanese company I'm dealing with. I advise medical device startups and large Japanese companies, but the medical device startups, they don't want to waste their time on a Japanese company that is not going to be, there's going to be like the none of the above, right? If it's somewhere where they can find a champion, yes. If it's local control, yes. If they act like a U.S. Silicon Valley company, it's yes. But I have difficulty telling, because of the Japanese structure and culture, which one I'm dealing with. Can you help me sort of figure that out? I'm the third one.
You're the second one, first one.
Yeah. So,
So none of them both. Actually, but I think the diversity. So there are business groups or companies that have quick hands that can move quicker. So, for example, if the top says yes, quicker, they can move quicker. So we're not in the same level yet, I would say, at least in the lab structure. But some of the other none of the above people can learn from someone in the three categories, I guess. If we gather together, we can tell our management in Tokyo that, hey, that company is doing this kind of quick action. Why not we? That's another kind of good point I think can happen to this structure. So none of the above, yes, at this moment. But if somebody starts quicker action with the three things, three categories that you described, maybe this structure can move things quicker is a basis.
Okay, maybe one more.
So just the other thing I would add to it is that I actually don't think that it's just a company question. I think it's also a question of the priority of the executive management. And I think in many cases, actually, if you know what the priorities are and you know what where the executives are actually focusing, those kind of decisions and those kind of interactions actually move a lot faster, right? Everywhere else outside of that, it's none of the above. But I think being knowledgeable about not just the company, not just the reputation of the company, but also within the company what the executives and leadership cares about actually can allow you to be more nuanced when you're dealing and making those choices.
Okay, one more question.
I have an easy one. Is failure still fatal in Japan? Fatal. Here, failure is like, yeah, it's bad, we are ashamed of it, but we get over it. In Japan, I was told failure is fatal. You have to go, seppuku. Is it true?
Well, I don't know too many Japanese companies. I only work for 2 companies in Japan, but Honda, it's not. Well, it's basically maybe our culture and DNA inherited from the founder. Yes, he said success is 1% of your work, which usually ends up 99% failure. So that's our sort of culture, DNA. On the research side, but product development side, even 1% of defect is 100% failure to that particular customer who bought that faulty product. So it's kind of clear line between research side and development side in Honda organization. And on the research side, failure is so common. So it's not common. It's fatal.
Honestly, it's still hard if you fail. It's I gotta say, you won't die, of course, but somewhat comeback. It'll take a long time at this moment, I guess. But I think some things are starting to change again. So we'll see.
So difficult question. So like in Green Japan cases, still failure is acceptable. So no management, no board member think the failure is not bad. So try to anyway do it. Then failure is always good. But so problem is so below the management level. So no one wants to try. So I don't know. So yeah. So it's not fatal, but really so less willingness to try something.
So I think it's still really kind of a challenge. I mean, if you look at one of the things in Silicon Valley I've heard often, I don't think I've ever heard any Japanese person say, it's this idea of a minimum viable product. You know, you sort of ship to something that, you know, is broken in some number of ways, but is kind of good enough, right? And I think, you know, a lot of Silicon Valley is, particularly of late, has been kind of built around that. And I think in some sense there's like a, you know, almost a visceral reaction on the part of many Japanese people I've met to sort of deal with that concept, because it means to some degree that you're shipping something that's broken. But from a business point of view, it turns out to be the right thing to do. So I do still think that, you know, that Japanese and Japanese companies need to embrace failure a little bit more, or embrace imperfection a little bit more. Because, you know, as the Facebook thing goes, you know, you move fast and you break things, and in the process of doing that, you create something great. You know, it's a little bit ugly in the middle sometimes, but, you know, in the end, you create something great.
Okay, so I just want to remind you to save the date. The next forum is going to be on the future of the medical device industry between Japan and Silicon Valley at the end of May. We already have some great panelists lined up for that as well, and it should be very exciting. So if you haven't yet, please sign up for the email distribution list for Keizai Silicon Valley for news and updates. And thank you so much to the panelists for sharing your insight. I got maybe some useful tips for my own work, so I'm very happy to be here. And thank you very much for attending today and for being here. And so what we'll do now is in this room we'll have the networking until 8:45. So thanks again.